Could I remind you that you will have the opportunity to participate in 2 Slido polls that you can access using the links that are provided and will appear on the screen. Our speakers in the first panel will map out what digitalization means to the maritime industry from a user's perspective. In the second panel, our speakers will help us to plot a course for the future of digitalization and comment on its potential to reach across borders and unify industries and technologies and create seamless work practices. To set the scene from a policy perspective and to open this morning's proceedings, I am delighted to welcome Reka Rozwadowski from DG Mare, who's responsible there for maritime policy. You are very welcome indeed, Reka. Thank you for attending this morning, and I pass the baton over to you.
Thank you very much, Liam, and thank you very much also for the organizers to put this event in place on behalf of DG Mare. I'm very glad to address you today at this Irish national event that is focusing on port digitalization. Indeed, let me first highlight that the blue economy is a crucial economic sector in the EU, and alone in the Atlantic area, blue economy has generated 73.4 billion euros of gross value added and employed 1.29 million people alone in 2017. Now, this gross value added is generated mainly by coastal tourism, but also importantly to mention, followed by port activities, about 12 billion euros of gross value added. And in terms of employment, port activities are also offering significant employment opportunities in the Atlantic area. But to realize that potential, we have to embed the blue economy in our long-term direction. With the European Green Deal, actually, we know where we are going. We need to try to change the model of the blue economy. We have to leave behind us the blue growth concept of the past and replace it with that of a sustainable blue economy. This is not greenwashing. What we actually want is to refocus our EU policies and support promoting circular, renewable, responsible and innovative economic activities. Many of the blue economy sectors, of course, are suffering because of the pandemic now. We need to make sure that every aspect of the recovery shifts the focus from exploitation to sustainability. And that is why we at the European Commission are preparing a forthcoming strategy for blue economy that we actually plan to adopt and publish on Monday next week. With this new approach to sustainable blue economy, we will make the blue economy as an integral part of the European Green Deal and also of Europe's green recovery. The new Atlantic Action Plan that we adopted last year in July is very timely in this respect, since it provides support and allows us to put the blue economy on the recovery path and on the path of transformation. As you know, one of the 4 key thematic pillars that Liam is also in charge of coordinating of this action plan is targeting Atlantic ports, which is also the central theme of the event today. It's worth mentioning that ports can play a major role in the sustainable development and for the transition to carbon-free economy, but to seize this opportunity, the role and potential of Atlantic ports need to be reconsidered, and the role of port operators as catalysts for blue businesses need to be strengthened. To that end, we have actually marked a concrete action under the new Atlantic Action Plan, targeting the blue accelerators for Atlantic ports to help scale up innovative businesses. And I was very glad to see yesterday that with the kickoff meeting of the so-called ASP-BAN project, this innovative action to create a blue accelerator scheme for the Atlantic ports has actually been put in motion already now. Ports play indeed a vital role in the European economy, being the entry point for over 75% of all EU trade. At the same time, like other transport sectors, ports are also facing major environmental, economic, and technological evolutions. The Commission's focus on greening and digitalization are therefore highly relevant for this sector. We expect the ports to be at the forefront of digital transformation and automation through multimodal hubs that drive economic growth. Becoming smart and connected are crucial factors for ports, as for the entire transport and logistics sector, but also in the broader blue economy context. Now, greening and digitalization will strengthen our ports' resilience, not least in the aftermath of the coronavirus crisis that we are experiencing today, but also in a context of increasing global competition, particularly from China. Now, with this in mind, I would like to wish you a fruitful event and inspiring discussions. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much indeed, Rika, for setting out the Commission's views and for providing a policy context within which the discussions this morning can take place. I couldn't agree more with the comment that you made in relation to the integration of the Atlantic strategy with other important programs such as ASPAN, and there is great scope there. I was enthused, as you were, with the kickoff meeting of ASPAN yesterday. Our next speaker is Isabel Reichbust. Isabel is Secretary General in the European Seaports Organization, ESPO, and has been since 2013. Before taking up this function, Isabel was Director of the European Federation of Inland Ports and was a Senior Advisor for ESPO for a number of years. Isabel is a law graduate, having studied at Louvain University. Before becoming Secretary General in ESPO, she held a number of positions in European public affairs and at the European Commission and DG Agriculture. She's also worked at an EU public affairs consultancy and as a political advisor to a member of the European Parliament. Isabel has an abiding interest and involvement in maritime transport for much of her career, and I can think of few people as qualified as Isabel to speak on how European ports are and will be affected by digitalization. It's a great pleasure to welcome you this morning, Isabel, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Liam, and good morning, everyone. It's for me a pleasure and an honor to participate in this workshop, which brings together the Atlantic Sea Basin, and we look at this important issue of digitalization. Digitalization, in fact, has, as we know, many faces, many shades, and for many, and I think, you said it also in the introduction, Liam, it looks like something extremely at a distance, sophisticated or whatever, but one tends to forget that digitalization is everywhere for everyone, and it's all around, and certainly also for European ports. Digitalization will really help European ports to deliver on their ambitions. And I selected like 5 how would I say, assets or 5 added values of digitalization. We know that ports, the core tasks of European ports is to be this node in the supply chain, but we see, and I think this workshop shows that very clearly, is that the tasks of European ports are becoming wider, so not at least in all the blue economy sectors, covering as well offshore, tourism, and so on. So there is a lot happening around and in ports, a lot more than before. So if you are with an enhanced complexity of a lot more stakeholders together, it's very important to get an order in this complexity, to exchange data, to have more transparency, to have more knowledge, more interaction between all the players. So therefore, the port can be the facilitator, and can also, digitalization will help a lot in this role. Then also, if we speak about additional and new roles to come, it's also like that ports will need more resources, in financial resources, but also resources in space. And this means the ports are heavy infrastructures and heavy assets. So all extras cost a lot of money. So it's very important to have the most efficient use of the existing resources, the existing space. So there also digitalization will allow to use to optimize that use and to see that the different activities in the port can better be combined. So digitalization can help in the rationalization of the existing, and so keep also new infrastructure, see that where the needs are. And then the third thing is, I think, very topical, since we are going with the COVID pandemic through one of the most disruptive periods in mankind. Also here, digitalization is and has been helping us. Of course, we now have these digital seminars and so on, and this has also been very helpful in the functioning of the ports. But what is very important to see is that through the COVID crisis, we have really seen a leap forward in contactless transport, contactless ticketing, and so on. So all things that will be very important also when we want to recover and reboost again passenger transport, maritime passenger transport, cruise, ferry transport. So this will be also the health added value to limit the interactions or unneeded interactions is also a very good asset of digitalization. Then the fourth and maybe the most known impact of digitalization or asset is the link to the Green Deal, achieving net zero emissions. There, of course, the main issue for if we look at maritime is to move to cleaner fuels and cleaner technologies. But linked to that, and additionally, as a complementary gain, efficiency can play a role. If we know more exactly when a vessel is arriving in the port, more exact planning in advance, port operations can be better planned, and we can do more with the existing infrastructure. Lose less time, use the infrastructure better, and also avoid that the vessel is waiting and emitting in front of the port. So that is important. And what is also important is everything what is linked to digitalization is also linked to transparency, because we will increase our knowledge. We will also be a lot more transparent. And that is my fifth added value. It's this transparency, because we all know 90% of European ports are also urban ports and also are very much located in dense urban areas or built-up areas. And so people nowadays, they want to know what is happening in the port. They want to know what is coming out as negative externalities from the port, but also the good things in the port. And so with digitalization, we will be able to monitor, to also share data. And so this will also help in developing this license to grow and license to operate. So these are a bit what I see as 5 added values. There are even more probably, but there are, just to finalize on this, there are 3 important conditions. And first is that we cooperate, so that all the actors cooperate and are willing to share data. Then the second thing I think is important, that we keep on seeing that digitalization is a tool. It's not a business in itself for ports. So it's something to help to give a better service to the customers, to optimize the use of infrastructure, the management of infrastructure, but it's not a business in itself. And the third and maybe the most important point is cybersecurity. Because we now in the last year, we have been more and more dependent of digital solutions and so on. It's getting very important in our lives, in our work. We have a security framework, the ISPS, for the physical security in and around ports. So, but the digital security is probably nowadays the most important thing to look at. It's one of the biggest possible. So I think for it's important to have on the agenda. So to conclude, I think digitalization is not something for only the big ports, and this is shown and will be shown, I think, in all the examples being discussed today. It can help the biggest European ports to decongest or to be the neutral data manager between all the shipping lines and so on. But it can also help the very small port to remain open, for instance, on a 24/7 basis by just having an automated access gate to the terminal, or by having here or there a 50 euro sensor to help discovering some irregularity in the equipment. So I think it has a very wide spectrum, and there is something for everyone, for all the ports. But I think this will be also revealed this morning. So I would like to thank you once again for inviting me for this workshop, and I hope you have a very interesting morning.
Thank you very much indeed, Isabel, and what a wonderful and broad landscape you have set out there in terms of the 5 points of added value, and then the 3 additional issues of cooperation, digitalization as a tool, not an end in itself, but as a tool for making improvements in our industry, and then the critical issue of cybersecurity. And I think that all of those themes are going to feed into the discussions that follow. So thank you very much indeed for that wonderful contribution. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. Adele O'Connor, who is Business Development Manager with the Irish Maritime Development Office. Adele's research was in the area of computer science. She was an early proponent of digitalization in the Irish maritime industry and was a key figure in the establishment of the International Fast and Secure Trade Lanes Project, IFSTL, for which she is project manager. That project is funded from Motorways of the Sea funding. Adele is also a member of the Atlantic Strategy Ports Pillar Coordination Team and will moderate our 2 panel discussions. Good morning, Adele, and I hand over to you now to take us through the first panel discussion and up to the coffee break at 11 o'clock.
Great, thank you, Liam, and delighted to be here this morning to moderate this session. And it's great to see so many participants online this morning, and it just, I suppose, really reflects how important this particular area is and how much attention it's getting at the moment. And there's great potential for digitalization to make port operations and logistics more efficient. The efficiency of the sector and its ability to conduct its operations in a smart and sustainable manner is of key importance for the competitiveness and future growth of the Atlantic Sea Basin. So we are delighted to have an excellent panel here this morning to discuss that. But before I mention that, I just wanted to remind you or let you know that we also have some Slido questions for you to answer. So as we kick off the panel, I'd invite you all, and hopefully it'll come up on the screen there. I'd invite you all to join Slido, and there are 2 questions that we'd love to hear from the audience on, and hopefully the details will come up there now. But the first question will be asking you, what do you see as the principal obstacles to digitalization in ports? So is it finance or cost benefit issues, skills or ICT knowledge, clarity and policy or regulations in place, or availability of technology? So when you get to, or when you go on to Slido and you answer that question, we will discuss that particular question at the end of the first session. And on the second question, which we'll discuss at the end of the second session, will be what port activities are most suitable to digitalization. So is it ship movement, cargo handling, reporting requirements, or multimodal connections in particular on rail and road. So we'd love to hear from our audience on that, and we'd love to bring that into the discussion. So we'd be delighted if you would join Slido.com. There's a hashtag there, Ports Pillar 2021, or you can also use the icon on the top left there to scan with your phones. But I think, you know, possibly a very straightforward way is to go onto Slido.com, hashtag Ports Pillar 2021, and we'd be delighted to hear from you there. So just to move on, I suppose, to what our first session is really going to discuss this morning. We have two panel discussions in the workshop today, and the first session is really to get the user's perspective. So we want to understand how ports and shipping operators, how are they adopting digitalisation now, and what kind of challenges are they facing? So we have three speakers this morning. Captain Paul O'Regan, the Chief Operations Officer and Harbour Master at the Port of Cork in Ireland. Mr. Claudio Pinto, the National Coordinator of the Dual Single Window Project in Portugal from the Port of Sines, and Mr. Carlos Botano Lagaron, the Head of Sustainability in the Port of Vigo. And we're delighted to hear from all of you this morning, and I really thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us. So I'd like to welcome Captain Paul O'Regan as our first speaker. So the way the session will run is I've asked each of the speakers to give us an overview. So I'll invite them to give their overviews first, and then for the last half an hour of the session, we will move into a panel discussion where we'll explore some of the issues that come up in the presentation and some questions at the end of the session, to the end of the session. And following that, we'll invite you then to take a coffee break before we move in. And I think we've had some really interesting points so far from Reka and Isabel. You know, lots of key issues coming up there. Sustainability, decongestion, transparency, emissions, cybersecurity. So it'd be really interesting now just to hear from the ports in terms of what the issues and how they're progressing through digitalisation. So Captain Paul O'Regan, Chief Operational Officer, Port of Cork, who are in the middle of a big expansion project on the container terminal. So Paul, I know you're exceptionally busy, so delighted that you can be here with us this morning. So over to you.
Thank you, Adele, and hello to the other panelists as well and everybody online. It's great to see Port of Vigo, Port of Sines and Brittany Ferries, who are a great customer of the Port of Cork, here as the other panelists as well. And it's interesting as we talk about digitization, because from a physical point of view, you know, we've worked with some people in the Port of Sines and Vigo as well in the past on different projects such as UNCAD Train for Trade and other areas. So it's interesting now that we talk about digitization and how the ports might cooperate and help each other through a greater level of digitization and integration. Sines, I'd like to congratulate you on your outstanding results and your growth in containerization this year. I think second in Europe, so fantastic to see that, certainly in a COVID year. I did have some slides that I gave to Fiona, and if we could put up those slides now, it would be great.
Great. Fiona, can you share Paul's slides, please? Here we go.
Thank you, Fiona. So the Port of Cork, we're a Tier 1 port, and we're located in the south of Ireland. We're the second busiest port in Ireland. We're multimodal. We're a port authority, but also a terminal operator. So when we speak about digitization and technology, I guess we've been doing this for years. Long before digitization became a catchphrase, I think we would have probably always have embraced new technology as we moved forward. in the different areas in the port from a point of view of terminal operations and also ship operations. And it's very interesting to see on the Slido immediately, Adele, that after you launch the first question, that it's both cargo operations and ship movements that people are already seeing the greatest benefits of digitization in. And of course, without ships and without ship movements and efficient cargo operations, ports wouldn't really be great ports. And I'd like to make a comment on what Isabel said about, you know, the advantages of digitization, perhaps in managing vessels and vessel arrivals, but also the cooperation in sharing non-commercial information between ports to help ports manage our operations better, reduce our environmental impact, and give a better customer service. And I think we have really seen during the COVID pandemic the disruption to schedules, particularly the low schedules, where certainly the smaller feeder ports, as a result of the larger hub ports, seeing irregular shipping movements and large volumes coming at them, and they're trying to cope. The smaller ports certainly have a huge issue then with trying to manage our throughput and manage our service to the customer as well. So greater knowledge sharing and digitization in that area would really help to be able to iron out the planning and how we serve our customers. So if you can just jump on to the next slide, please, Fiona. I'll give an overview of the port and where we are with this. We're as we say, we're a port authority and a terminal operator. We are coming to the final stage of a new container terminal build of 100 million euros. And that's the first stage of probably the next 10 to 15 years of developments within the port, as the port moves from being a city center port or city-centered port out to more of a deeper water river port. And it's going to be a very interesting and challenging time. And I think digitization is actually one of our key pillars of advancement in our own master plan and also in our corporate plan that needs to be approved by our shareholder, which is the Department of Transport. So we do place digitization very high on this list. So in 2019, we took the bull by the horns and we engaged another port, actually, a port that is very well advanced in digitization and how they manage their issues, to come and do a root and branch review of our digitization maturity and where are we along the roadmap to being to developing and putting things in place. And we found that we had an overall score of 1.6 out of 5, which surprised us because we thought we were doing a little bit better. And in fact, we were doing quite well in different areas that we could see growth in, such as the Lolo trade, the cruise industry, but we weren't doing so well with the integration across other areas then and how we managed it. So we now have an ambition by 2023 to move that score up close to 4, which is a huge ask. And I think it's something that is achievable, but it's achievable only by greater cooperation and understanding. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So our roadmap now from 2019 onwards, right, to move to 4 is in-port connectivity. And we are looking, of course, in order to support any of the initiatives we have, we need good connectivity, we need good bandwidth, we need to be able to run our systems. So therefore, we will start looking at our own networks, whether we roll out a 5G network ourselves or not, or we piggyback on somebody else. And again, for cybersecurity and protection, we really are concentrating on these areas. Smart port systems, and we are working with a number of companies over the last number of years to improve and implement new smart port systems. Before we can go out to the wider external community, I think we need to have our own systems good first. And this is a very important area for us. I think one thing that I would mention on this is I am a member of the International Harbour Masters Group and also a wider global stevedoring group. And what we see globally is that there are plenty of solutions to either full port solutions for digitization, part port solutions, terminal solutions. Somewhere along the way, they all integrate, they all cross over each other. But there are good examples and there are not so good examples. So I think there is a difficulty here, and perhaps we'll put it out to the panel afterwards, with understanding what is a good product for your port and what is not a good product for the port. There are more and more product providers offering a wide range of digitization products for ports and telling every port that they can work wonders for what we can do. But it's obviously a difficult area to get into, and one of the greatest benefits that we have found is our overall port network, either within ESPO or within our wider port network of operators, where we can see projects that have been brought ahead in other ports and see the ones that work and the ones that don't work. We are a small port in the context of the overall European port network and global port network, yet we have contacts right through the United States, Asia and Europe. We can't afford to have large-scale projects that we would spend a lot of money on if they don't work. So we have to be right first time in a lot of the projects that we put in and a lot of the projects that we bring ahead. Can you jump on, please, Fiona? Thank you. So where are our current projects? Most importantly, I think, on top of the list is our people, and being able to support any sort of digitization or technology advancements or improvements. We have to have people who understand what they're doing. We have to have people who can evaluate what is a good proposition and evaluate what is perhaps not so good. Not so good cost.
1 minute to conclude.
Thank you. And really, this is a root and branch for us now at this stage. We didn't have our own IT department before. We're starting to build a much broader, robust IT support internally to help us move ahead. Automated processes. We were very lucky that we were the only port in Ireland that had a vehicle booking system at the start of COVID, which meant that none of the drivers had to actually interact or transfer paperwork on our terminals. That worked very well. We have OCR in order to manage information and detect damage on all of the terminals. Port Management Information System is an internal system to us, but now we have more and more players being part of it. Mobility management plans, and we are now looking at all our and applying machine learning to those to actually take out any of the issues that we see coming in those messages. The digital twin, we are building a digital twin report and hopefully move that forward to manage assets into the future, to manage safety, to manage security. Again, it's very hard to identify some of the cost benefit analysis in these. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. It's not always readily identifiable where you're going to get savings, you're going to get better use of your resources, or you're going to get income streams. But I do think that they become clear as we move on. And the last slide, please. And is there a roadmap? In our particular case, there's not a single roadmap, and there's not a single solution. I think there's a wide range of solutions depending on what the port is doing, how the port wants to connect with other ports and the customers. But certainly there is a place for everything on this slide within digitization and being a smart port into the future. So that, I think, is the last slide, Fiona.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. And I mean, lots of really important points there. Really interested to discuss in the panel, you know, how your engagement with another port and to look at your digital maturity, and also the concept as well that there's lots of products out there, and how, you know, a port, you know, tries to understand what product is best for them and what's worth their investment. So I think lots of areas to discuss in the panel there. So thank you, Paul, for that. Moving on, so we had Mr. Christopher Kerwin from Britain Ferries as our second speaker. Now, Christopher is just having a little bit of technical difficulty at the moment joining us. So we'll move on to Mr. Claudio Pinto, and hopefully Christopher can join us at the end of the session. So Mr. Claudio Pinto, who is the National Coordinator of the Dual project, which is the Portuguese single window project from Port of Sinhas. And Claudio has had a significant role in the development of Portugal's single window environment. And Claudio, I saw recently that Port of Sinhas has also been successful in a new EU Green Deal project as well, on smart green ports. So lots of interesting things happening in the Port of Sinhas. So look, really looking forward to hearing from you, and over to you, Claudio.
Okay. I will share my screen with you. Are you listening? Well?
Yes, that's great, Claudio, and we can see your slides. So that's brilliant. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and I would like to thank you the opportunity to talk about and to share with you our main project related with the digital transformation and innovation process in Portuguese ports. What is the logistical single window? The JUL is a project promoted by all Portuguese ports under the umbrella of the Portugal Port Association. This project can be comprehended as a new step given by the Portuguese ports towards digital transformation, thus fulfilling all the work that has been done over the last 2 decades. It aims at simplifying and harmonizing procedures along the whole logistic chain while integrating the land means of transport and the dry ports. Thinking a bit more ahead, our goal is to build a search generation platform from a technological point of view, which, based on pillars such as mobility, cloud, and big data, allows for the development of concepts like the smart ports, the extended gateways, the synchromodal networks, and physical internet concepts. Of course, some of them will be delivered within the scope of the project, while others, like synchromodality and the physical internet, will be developed afterwards. This is not only a technological project to develop digital solutions. It's more than that. We aim at defining the basis and the tools assuring a sustainable evolution and operation of the platform. In this manner, we have 5 main deliverables in the project. Starting from the left side, the national reference model defining all the business process supported by the platform, the interoperability framework defining the interfaces and the set of electronic messages allowing to establish the collaboration among the parties. We have the digital tools that I will detail ahead in this presentation, which consist on the set of applications used by the parties. The legislation package, which establishes the legal framework for the use and management of the platform, and the governance framework defining how the port authorities, as owners of the platform, will perform its governance. This is some figures that was taken from 1 year of usage of the application. This is the current situation. We have already operating in the platform 10 ports in Portugal. We are connecting around 70 dry ports, railway or multimodal platforms in the Iberian Peninsula. We manage more than 6,500 ship calls and 6,000 trains. We have at this moment more than 3,000 users using the service that we offer in the platform. We expect to double these numbers until the end of the year when we finish the rollout phase that we are performing at this moment. And we have issued around 20,000 invoices in the platform. I would like to underline this topic, the invoices topic, because I think we have a single situation in the European context, because we have performed with authorities what you call the single invoice in the port, which means that when a ship comes to a Portuguese port and they exit the port, at average in 2 days we issue an invoice comprising all the services provided by 5 authorities. The service provided by the Port Authority, the Customs, the Health, and the Maritime Authority. So this is the figures of the current situation of the project. Talking about the digital tools that we are developing, this is a portfolio of application provided by the platform. Each one was developed to support a specific business domain. In this way, this way of architecting the platform gives us agility and flexibility to respond to the user's demands in the future. In addition, it allows the community of users to combine their own solutions with the ones offered by us. For instance, we have, of course, a set of solutions, a set of applications to deal with the information flows and the requirements needed for manage a ship call. We have solutions to deal with the issues related with the control access to the facilities. We have solutions to share information with the railway operators or with the train operators. We have solutions to deal with the risk that a ship represents to the port, related with safety. We have solutions to collaborate with the authorities and with the terminal operators related with the inspection that are needed to be done to the cargo. And of course, we have solutions to deal with the invoice and the payments of the service that are provided. Just to give you some examples, the main application that we have in this new platform is the terminal operating system, where we offer all the services needed to plan and to report the cargo handling in each one of the nodes of the network. The project promoters are all the port authorities under the umbrella of Portugal Port Associations. We have with us all the authorities, the Customs, the National Maritime Authority, the Border Control, the Health, the Vet and Phyto authorities. And I would like to underline the collaboration that we have with the Maritime Administration. They are together with us. They are developing the application, the digital tools for the Maritime Administration. They will receive from the application that we have in each port community the reporting formalities, for instance, and they will share this information with the EMSA, for instance. This allows us to be compliant with the new regulation, the new European regulation, the European Maritime Single Window regulation. And it's done for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. I'm really amazed at how successful the project has been, and it's really a credit to you and the rest of the team, and the team in Portugal to be able to bring such a project to fruition, and to such success. And I'd be interested to discuss maybe during the panel session in terms of how to bring all those stakeholders together, because I think there's a lot that we can learn in some of the other Atlantic member states, in what you've done in Portugal and the model that you've used. So thank you for that overview. Just a reminder before we move on to the next speaker about Slido. So if you've just joined us late, I just wanted to let you know that we have slido.com, #PortsPillar2021. We've 2 questions. What do you see as the principal obstacles to digitalisation in ports, and what port activities are most suitable to digitalisation? So we'd really love to hear from our audience, and we'll be discussing the first question at the end of this particular panel and the second question at the end of the second panel. So really looking forward to hearing from our audience on those questions. Now, moving on to our next speaker in this panel. So we have Mr. Carlos Botana Lagaron, the Head of Sustainability in the Port of Vigo. So Carlos, we are really looking forward to hearing from you this morning on what's happening in the Port of Vigo on digitalisation.
Thank you, Adele. Thank you to invite the Port of Vigo to participate. I go to share my presentation. It is possible.
Yeah. So
have a little problem.
If you're having difficulty, Carlos, we can share from our end. So we'll give you a second there just to see if you can share.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
No problem.
No.
No problem. Fiona, can
No,
you
now I have.
Oh, you have it. You have it. Great.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you.
We can see that now. So if you want to go into presentation mode. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. In this slide, this is possible to see the Port of Vigo. The Port of Vigo is very close, very near of the city, and very close. It's in the Bay of Vigo. It's a very particular bay because have 5 protecting areas. For that reason, the efficiency and the environment issues and the use of the space is very demanding for all the people, for the citizens, and for the reason it is necessary the transparency. It is necessary to have a very efficient management system in the port. The ports are a hub where all maritime economy activities converge. There are a lot of activities in the Port of Vigo. It's the first fishing port. There are naval industry, 15 shipyards. There are general cargo, cruiser, nautical, and the port is the hub and the connecting with all these activity. We have in the beginning of the Blue Growth Strategy 4 goals to become green, innovative, connecting, and inclusive. Now we have only 3: green, digitalization, and inclusive. The first question is, what is the meaning of the concept 4.0, the digitalization? Isabel spoke in the presentation, the digitalization is a tool. What is the concept 4.0? Robotic, big data, augmented reality, 3D, artificial intelligence, neuronal system. It is true, but in my point of view, the most important is to measure knowing our reality. We have millions of data available, and it's impossible to analyze intuitively. What is the problem? We have data about the consumption of energy, the consumption of grain, about the environment, about the logistic issue, and it is very difficult to make the best decision in very fast. For this reason, we need a support system to make the best decision. In our strategy, we have different examples of projects with the concept 4.0, the digitalization. One is the project Porto, ports self-sufficient with the use of the renewable energy. Another is the port forward, is in the Horizon 2020, is the design of the port of the future. Another is Marinette, the Blue Carriers, is an Interreg project, is the use of the digitalization in the training activities because it is necessary to go together. Another is the smart system, and there are other, the fish market 4.0, or the naval 4.0, or the ecologistic is a Sudoe project with Portugal and Galicia to improve and develop the smart system in the logistic activities. I want to put 2 examples or 3 examples. The first example is in Horizon 2020, the port forward. There are several ports, Vigo, Baleares, Livorno, and other, and there are technological companies in these projects. In our case study is the University of Brunel, Leitat, and the Institute of Fraunhofer. In the Port Vigo use case, is about our container terminal. The idea is to design the Green Yard Scheduler. Is a decision support system for more efficient and sustainable container terminal operation. The goal: increase the container terminal productivity, reduce the carbon footprint on the terminal, integrate with the terminal operating system, harmonize container yard operation. The first thing is identify the problem. We have the carbon footprint for all the ports, escape 1, 2, and 3, with all the terminals and all the operators. And in the case of the container terminal, you can see the carbon footprint, the different steps of the container terminal. The most important in the container terminal is the berthing operation, around the 47%. The second is the movement of vehicles, 30%, and then the use of the track-turning and register in the terminal, around the 10%. For this reason, we identify, and with the use of the mathematical system to connect the terminal with this mathematical system, it is possible to solve and to improve the efficiency in our terminal. The first problem is to determine the sequence of the container movements in the terminal, and the reduction, it is possible to obtain 4–6%. The second is the yard crane scheduling problem, determine the allocation and schedule of the yard cranes, and the reduction is around the 38%. And last, the container position problem, determine the slot allocation of container, and the reduction is near the 30%. This is the possibility to have the IT tools permit to have the best the decision in the localization of the container, in the decision in the movement, reduce the emission, reduce the costs because reduce the consumption of energy. You are more efficient in the use of the space. I think this is a good example. Another good example is the Portos project, self-sufficient port with renewable energy, is an Atlantic project with different ports and countries, and the idea is developing and promoting the implementation of renewable energy, especially marine renewable energy in the Atlantic area. The impact reduce the greenhouse gases emission and pollution, improving the competitiveness of the Atlantic area and the emerging marine renewable energy market through the development and transfer of knowledge and decision support tools. The same, it is necessary tool for the port to make the best decision, what is the best renewable energy we need in my port with my demand. And then the last is the Blue Port Observatory to bring visibility to the benefits of the integration of the renewable energies in ports. Another example, but it's totally different, is the auction hall of the fish market 4.0. In this project, the exercise is the hybridization of the knowledge of the different sectors.
1 minute to conclude.
Okay, yeah, it is finished. Automotive sector, fishing sector, energy, and the training sector with the project Marinet, and design what is the ocean hall of the future with one level of transparency, traceability, sustainability, equality. Everybody know what is the information in the ocean hall. These fish come for the good environment pleasure, and then the modern consumer is more aware of the environment problems, seek more and more products that are productive with the full respect to conservation principle. For the reason, this is other example, but we have some. Thank you very much. I answer the question when finish the panel. Thank you.
Carlos, thank you for that presentation, and really interesting to look at the various projects that the port are involved in, and just that link between digitalization and energy efficiency and sustainability. And I think that's becoming a theme that's much more apparent in all the presentations, and certainly something that's going to be much more on everybody's agenda as we try to reach the various greenhouse gas emissions targets that we've all been set. So I think I think we will take the results. Liz, I think we have the results of the Slido poll. So we might just bring that up on the screen before we move into the panel discussion. If they're available.
Okay, I'm just going to bring it up there now, Adele.
Great, thanks, Liz.
So can you see that, Adele?
Yes, so the port activities most suitable to digitalization. So I think Paul mentioned this at the start of his presentation, actually. So looking at ship movements and cargo handling as being the key activities. I'm a little bit surprised that there is not more on the reporting or regulatory requirements, because that is something maybe that I would have thought even through the single window, and that would be a big burden on ports and shipping operators. So interesting to see those results. So 36% ship movements, 44% cargo handling, and only 8% there in reporting and 12% on multimodal connections. So I'd like to invite back, unfortunately, Christopher from Brittany Ferries, I don't think is able to join us. So I'd like to invite our panel back on the screen. If you can turn your cameras back on, and we will move into our panel discussion. Paul, is Paul there?
Yes, Adele.
Paul, just on those poll results, you mentioned at the start, I think that's what you expected it to be.
Yeah, it's not surprising. I guess ship movements and cargo operations are low-hanging fruit. Carlos's presentation really pointed that out when you look at the efficiencies that can be gained by employing good technology and digitization, terminal operating systems in a container terminal to reduce moves, to create better data flows, to create efficiencies, reduce physical resources that are necessary to do jobs through automation. And if you look at the way the industry has developed, and if you look at it from I suppose a cost first analysis, there are more tools available out there to make cargo handling more efficient than any other area that we apply to the port sector. If you look at the regulatory part of it, it's probably the most difficult part to tackle and has the least value chain from a point of view of commercial operators offering a service, because most of the regulatory issues that we encounter are more or less statutory, where you have to integrate with a lot of the government departments. So therefore, there's probably less of an advantage to the commercial operators to offer products in that area. But certainly with shipping and cargo globally, and certainly in the unitized cargo, there's an array of products and a huge advantage to be able to get the right product to increase efficiency and reduce costs.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you there, because especially, especially for, we'll say, a port that's looking for the shelf solutions, there's probably more on the market in that regard, and the regulatory is probably is more customized in terms of people's individual operations and trying to link up with the various customs authorities in your own jurisdiction. Claudio, I'd be interested to get your views on that, because obviously you have linked in with your authorities, and I know Port Cork as well have linked in on the customs side of things, but I'd be interested on your thoughts, in terms of what you see as, you've implemented the single window in Portugal. What has been the most beneficial, do you think, to ports? What types of services are you seeing that are being most beneficial?
I think the value that you provide with this solution, the value that you provide to our clients, it's the simplification and the harmonization of the process in a national scope. In the past, we have different procedures for cargo handling or for the ship management, for deal with the issues related with customs. We had different procedures in each of the ports, and with this kind of projects, this project that I present to you today, it is not the first project that we did. But with this project, we harmonize, we simplify the procedures, and I think this is the most value that you give for our clients.
And can I ask, we have a project that's launching at the moment, an international fast and secure trade lane project, which will be about creating efficiencies between ports in terms of, the logistics processes will be considered, and there's a pilot between Dublin and Cherbourg, and then that to be rolled out to other motorways of the sea routes. But what's of interest, and even from an Irish ports perspective, is, you know, how you bring all the ports together in terms of a solution, and you've done that in Portugal. So how did you bring the various stakeholders together? What is the model that you've used to bring not just the ports, but the various authorities and everybody to the table in terms of rolling this out?
I was thinking about that in the last minutes. I don't know. I don't really know what our secret is. In fact, we managed to put all the authorities and the private entities involved in the common objective, in the common goal. But I know somewhere in our path, we realize that we need new tools, that we need tools integrating all the entities, all the authorities. Maybe the trigger, it was in 2000, around 2007, 2008, when we did the first project with the customer authorities. We did two projects at the same time. From the port side, we developed the first port single window platform. At that time, it was a project from Port of Sines in the south of the country, from Port of Lisbon with the Port of Leixões that is in the north of the country, and we did that together with the customs authority, because in that time they realized too that they need new tools to manage all the data, all the information related with the cargo, with the containerized cargo, and so on. And we did that together. Maybe that was the trigger. We gained trust with that. I think the trust is the most relevant issue in this. The trust from the authorities and the trust from the private sector that use our services.
And I think that's a key point, is the trust there, and doing a kind of doing a project at the start that, you know, somewhat whets the appetite for doing something larger. And it's really interesting to look at how you've rolled out that model. And the project itself, does that sit? Who will say has control of the project? Is it all the project partners, or as a group, or where does the project? Who owns the project as such?
The owner of the project are the port authorities.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a committee where we bring all the other entities from the private and from the public sector. Okay.
Great. That's really interesting. Carlos, just to come to you on that, in terms of what's happening in Puerto Vigo, you know, and in Spain, you know, in terms of, so I can see that you're already involved in a number of collaborative projects. Do you see similar trends in Spain in terms of the different ports collaborating together, or, you know, on projects, or what do you see as the main driver in terms of your own digitalization strategy in Puerto Vigo?
Thank you. The situation is a little different than the Portugal. I have more collaboration in digitalization with Portugal, or the Port of Leixões and the Euroregion Galicia, north of Portugal. We have several projects in the digitalization and work together. But in the case of Spain, there are different systems or different tools, but it's not each port decide what the best solution for the port, not that only the one direction, a different direction. It is possible the system of the Port of Vigo, the smart system, it is similar than the system in the Valencia, Barcelona and other, but it's a decision of the port. It's total difference in the case of the Spain.
Okay. And I suppose to talk to you a little bit more, you mentioned sustainability a lot in your presentation, and there are obviously some key challenges with that, Carlos. So I'd just like to explore that a little bit further. So what do you think are the major challenges to securing this green future for ports, and what role do you think digitalization plays in that?
Yes, thank you. The European Union have proposed a very ambitious commitments, more demanding than other international organizations. One example is the goal of the reduction of the emission 55% by 2030, and the carbon neutral emission by 2015. For the port, it is not easy to comply with these commitments. It is a good commitment, but it is not easy. And in the case of the big port, Rotterdam, Hamburg, they have big environment teams and they have the capacity to design their strategy. But the problem in Europe, there are a lot of small and medium ports, and it is more complicated to have to each strategy in this matter. I think the paper of the smart system of the digitalization have a very important paper in this matter. We need, or they need, informatical tool to give support to make a decision and design a strategy. In the case of the Port of Vigo, we are working in the implementation of several tools to give support in this line, and digitalization, it is very important. Our goal is this tool, it is possible to use the rest of the port of Spain. We are working with all the other ports, but I think it is the digitalization have a very important part in all these important challenges. Another important challenge is the relation between the port and city. The digitalization, it is a very good system to give more transparency and to give feedback with the city and to know the situation of the port, because it is necessary to speak the same language, the citizen and the port. We have and the port from zero and digitalization and this type of platform, it is the best way to obtain this goal. There are others with the use of drones in monitoring, robotics, blockchain, traceability, but I think this is the big two challenges. I don't listen, sorry.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Now, apologies.
Sorry.
Sorry, Paul, go ahead. Yeah.
Can I add to that, actually? It's a very good point, that Carl's point of view of the integration and the understanding of ports and cities and urban areas as well, and how digitization can help there. There are many aspects of the port operations that affect cities and many aspects of the city operations that affect ports. And I think by working much closer together, even from a point of view of traffic management, environmental initiatives, environmental compliance, there can be a greater level of harmony between ports and the city and urban areas that are around them, and a much greater level of understanding as we can, I guess, use digitization platforms to share information that is so valuable to the cities as well. I mean, it is obvious to everybody on this call that cities and urban areas won't survive without ports, but it's not always too obvious to the city and urban areas that they need ports to survive. So it's a very strong point. And back to the point of CINES with the Portuguese port community system, it is hugely beneficial to have a system that is integrated and all of the actors are part of it. I think what is really telling from the point from CNES is they started in 2007, 2008 with an initial project. So you can see the time that it takes to actually build up the trust, the cooperation in order to get to where they are today. And ultimately, speaking from an Irish port perspective, that is something that we should be aiming for. There is, of course, the individual nature of each port that needs to be catered for. There's the overall capital funding in order to get this moving. But I think that the benefits of having such a single window far outweigh the individual needs of one port, and also will really dwarf the capital funding that's needed at the start. So I think that is something that a model that really could be taken on and used quite efficiently and quite well. So there are some real good learnings to come out of this panel, I think, you know.
Yeah. And Paul, can I just ask you, just to, I suppose, zone in on that a bit, and we're talking about ports, and you know that ports are not just logistics hubs anymore, that they're key parts of the community. They're these multimodal digital hubs. You know, a port that is so busy with its day-to-day operations and actually trying to fulfill its core goal. How do you tackle that? I mean, you know, that this view that ports need to, you know, be experts in digitalization, be experts in these industry 4.0 technologies, you know, in terms of having the resources to build your team, to take your port on the pathway from, you know, the scale you mentioned earlier. How do we do that? Is it a case that, for example, we need to encourage more collaboration between ports, that we need to, you know, kind of not reinvent the wheel between ports? What do you see as being how do we overcome that?
Yeah, I think, look, the number one, I think, for us to be able to overcome that is collaboration. We have mega ports in Europe that have mega incomes, huge budgets, and in fairness to those ports, they are reinvesting into those ports in digitization, in community, and in environmental initiatives that many of the smaller ports can never afford to do on the level of income that we generate through the port. And we can never afford, speaking solely just from Cork, we can never afford to have a division dedicated to digitalization or the environment. We have to use the people that we have to support all of the different areas. However, what we can do by collaborating with the larger ports, and I think it is certainly in the corporate social responsibility of those ports as well, to be able to share the technology that they can bring forward and advance. Because if you look at how they generate their income as well as being main hub ports, but they can't survive without the smaller ports either. We are their customer. They are the big guys that are using the small ports in order to be able to establish a greater transport network right across Europe. So I think there is certainly collaboration is going to be the way forward with this. There are some really, really good tools on the market that layer up the port to become a modern, connected, digitized port. And I think that ports as well can be very clever about looking at key areas where they can gain maximum efficiency for minimum value. So we're matching what we have. We're looking at the key areas that we can make a difference in ourselves, and then we're looking at the broader areas and the wider communities and the wider European context to say, okay, we don't have enough capex power and we don't have enough expertise to generate forward momentum here. So now we need to reach out to somebody to help us. And I think that really is the way that we're going to go forward. Much of the tools that we're using today are either tools that we've developed ourselves or that we've seen working very well in other ports, and we've connected out, reached out and said, hey, do you think this would work for us and can you help us? We've worked with Rotterdam, we've worked with Amsterdam, we've worked with Hamburg. We've worked with Port of Halifax currently on some AI stuff, or AL stuff, sorry, and we've worked with Singapore. And you know, there's nothing stopping us from reaching out, and ports are usually quite good to help each other out as well from that perspective.
Thanks,
Hello.
Paul. And I think that's
Hello.
a great point. Carlos, do you want to come in there?
Yes, only short comments. I think it's very
Yes.
interesting question on this. I think there are two ways, important ways. One is the ports network, the case of ESPO, the different collaboration in the Atlantic area, to know the different knowledge that are in other ports. But the other, in our Blue Growth strategy, we work very hard and strong with the research center and the university that are in the port area, because it is impossible to have experts in all areas. It's very complicated. But if you work with the university, with the research center of the automotive, the Marine Research Center and the rest, you have a good spring to include in your port. This is the two possibility, because the medium and small port don't have the big budget to develop all the ideas. But if you work with other ports and if you work with the local stakeholder, you have a very good capacity.
Thank you, Carlos. Yeah, and we've seen examples of that in an Irish context well, in terms of linking in with research centres, particularly in areas of data analytics and that. But, you know, in terms of the models, it's really interesting to look at the models, because in terms of resources and budgets and how you get the research model to work with the maritime industry, which is very operationally focused, it's interesting how to marry those two, because we've seen some difficulties in the past whereby, you know, the research is probably more long-term and the ports are more focused on, you know, on near-term challenges with a view to the long-term. So it's how do you marry that? But really, really interesting point. Claudio, can I just ask you, you have done so much in Portugal to bring the various stakeholders together, and as Paul mentioned, you know, having that project back in 2008, 2007, 2008 was critical in terms of building trust. But is there plans to extend your model out beyond Portugal to link in with other you know, ports and other member states, and to look at collaboration? Or is it, you know, and I know your single window from a regulatory point of view is mainly a Portuguese project, but are there any plans to or have you already maybe linked out with some European partners?
Yes, we have plans in the scope of this project and for the future to connect our platform with other platforms like this one, regional platforms, or maybe platforms just from one part. I had conversation with, for instance, with Antwerp and with Rotterdam, to start working with them to start sharing data related with the ships and the ships movements and the cargo movement. Yeah. So we want to go to this in this way. Yes. As well, we have plans to integrate our platform with, for instance, with marketplaces, to share information with them about the services that are available, and share with them data that give visibility to all the logistic chain. Yeah.
You are muted, Adele.
Apologies, thanks, Liz. Talking to myself here. There's a question. Thank you for that answer, Claudio. I just, to close the session, there's a question that has come in from the audience that I think might be of interest, and digital twin has come up in a few of the presentations. And somebody from our audience has asked that they would like to know a little bit more about the projects to implement digital twin in the ports and what the expected benefits are. So just a closing remark in relation to that. Paul, I come to you first there on that. Oh, I think you're on mute as well, Paul.
Yeah, again, probably as well talking to myself. I think it's very, very difficult to put a cost-benefit analysis to digital twin at the moment, okay? And there's a certain leap of faith that has to be taken with it. If you look at what the concept of a digital twin is supposed to be, and you just take it on its core value, which is it is an absolute replica of your port digitized so that you can carry it anywhere and manage your assets to best efficiency, then that's a great way of looking at it. And if you look at COVID, where many of us have had to work from home, offices have been closed, or day-to-day connections and meetings with other colleagues and staff are very limited. So how beneficial is a digital twin then in the last 12 months, where you can actually share information over a platform? You're looking at the same asset, you're discussing it, you're managing traffic, you're managing efficiencies, you can see where your assets are not performing effectively. You can manage emergency situations, you can manage dredging, you can manage ship movements, and you can manage that over a platform where 6, 7, 8, 10 of you can actually view this together. So if you think of most ports, some of them are small and confined in tight areas, more of them are spread over many, many kilometers, and you have to physically be on the ground to make some decisions. So I think there are really, really many advantages to having a digital twin. Can I put a cost-benefit analysis on it at the moment? No, and funny now, it's a similar question that our CEO has asked me to do, a cost-benefit analysis on a digital twin. So I'll get back to you on that.
Great, thank you, Paul. Carlos or Claudio, do you want to make any remarks on that before we close the panel on the digital twin?
I think it is okay. It's a perfect example. My colleagues of the Port of Cork they explain very good. I don't have more things.
Okay. Great. Okay, listen, I think it's fair to say that we could talk for another half an hour here, but unfortunately we have to close to give people a chance to get a cup of coffee before we move into the next session. But I really want to thank our three panelists, Captain Paul O'Regan from the Port of Cork, Mr. Claudio Pinto from the Port of Sines, and Mr. Carlos Botano-Lagron from the Port of Vigo. Really thank you for your contributions this morning, and I really think that we can take some of those points further, and a lot to think about there. So thank you. And I'd like to invite our participants now to take a 10-minute break, just to grab a cup of coffee, and we will rejoin at 11:10. So you've about 8 minutes to get the kettle on. So thank you again, and we will see you at 11:10.
Modes of transportation, you want to keep your ship going as much as possible, and you also want to utilize the port infrastructure as much as possible. It does not allow for one owner, such as we have in the Apple case, for example, and it is also building up on episodic interactions. One of the biggest challenges that we have associated to ports is that the stakeholders of the ports experience too low predictability, and I was highly engaged in running and co-founded also what was called the Port CDM, Port Collaborative Decision Making concept, which was basically about different actors sharing situational awareness. We ran that concept for in testbeds in 13 ports, and basically what we saw that is only about 40% of the time that value is provided to the visitors. The rest is waiting times. So what is the need? There are some winds of change blowing. we need to be able to connect what happens at sea with what happens at shore. We see a lot of things going on in relation to remote operations, enhanced predictability of movement and operations along the whole transport chain, increased information transparency with direct and indirect stakeholders, seamless integration with the multimodal transport chain. There is an emerging debate at the moment between engaged scholars and reflective practitioners talking about how digitalization actually can bring value to the maritime sector that is coined under Maritime Mathematics, and is also approaches being established to upgrade the human capabilities within digitalization. So a strong focus at the moment is just-in-time operations driven by standardization, collaborative alignment, meaning that different actors are aligning to each other, and the utilization of the appointment economy. Unfortunately, as we saw, for example, in the Suez Canal blockage, it is still so that very many passengers and also port calls are handled by first come, first served, are coordinated based on the physical arrival rather than introducing some kind of slot management system. And what is the need? We need information sharing communities, both on the local level within the port, but also connected to authorities as well as horizontal communities. And you see, for example, trade lanes as one example of a horizontal community. Even IMO is now highlighting very importantly that digital data sharing is key to actually respond to the environmental concerns that we have there. What I did was that I asked one of my colleagues to actually produce me a video to show how things are looking in the Atlantic Basin. And I think that was pretty interesting to see that there is a lot of ships, and the blue arrows are the ones that are showing us a little bit the larger ships, and the green ones are more are smaller ones. But you see here that there is a lot of traffic going south of England, but there are some traffic also going in the Irish Sea, so to say, and of course there is a track over to the US side here. And the thing is that there are a lot of congestions arriving here in different ways, and those congestions needs to be forecasted, and the ones that we are serving in the shipping industry, we as ports, we as shipping companies, we as agents, etc., need to be able to forecast and say how and when will the clients that we serve actually be those services be fulfilled. The way that we are conceiving this, and this is an ongoing debate that is happening a lot now, is to conceive the port as sustainable and smart. By doing that, it is addressed of looking at the port as a multidimensional hub, both as a transport hub, which would put the light to the efficiency, challenging the stevedore arrangements, ensuring that the throughput is made as fast as possible, and or that the stock management which some ports are establishing. Also the port as an energy hub, which would enable us to secure a situation where we both run the operations inside the port by good means of energy, but also as a driver for the green conversion. And here I think that there will be very big opportunities for the different ports of the world to actually establish unique capabilities in relation to that the fleet will be changed within the next 10 years, where we will see new engines and so on coming up, and thereby requiring different types of energy, and also as an information hub. And given the perspective on being an information hub means that information or digital information is going to be key to actually coordinate those operations. Port calls, train calls, truck calls, but also the provision of energy in different ways. We see now also that there are things happening such as smart containers and intelligent cargo. That means that the port would have an opportunity to provide new information and situational awareness to the different stakeholders of the port and the ones that are utilizing the whole maritime ecosystem or transport system. So what has been done is actually to push, and I've been together with some colleagues here, very instrumental in pushing a discourse on what is called the Maritime Mathematics, and there are now very strong attention directed to this from many different nations, becoming an arena for how we can increase the efficiency, safety, ecological sustainability, and resilience of the world shipping industry, where we need to ensure that we are boosting the collaboration among the different partners. So what is the need? The need is to enhance predictability enabled by standardized data sharing, to enhanced predictability enabled by situational awareness, and also data-driven decision making. And in the latter point here, we see a lot of machine learning, AI applications coming forward. And the key is to balance capital productivity for the different involved organizations at the same time as we are also boosting the energy efficiency, which becomes then a societal and planetary concern through ecosystem collaboration. So as a final point, what I see is that we are walking from a very fragmented situation when it comes to situational awareness to rely our decisions on common situational awareness, from low information quality to high and reliable information quality, from lacking planning horizons to predictable operations, from unstructured information exchange to standardized data exchange, from suboptimized operations to a more mature collaboration culture, unnecessary waiting times to just-in-time operations, and also from low IT maturity to enhanced IT systems and third-party innovation opportunities. And interesting to see is that the ecosystem of maritime transport is opening up now. We see hackathons happening with a lot of inspiration for how the ports of the future would look like, for example. So this was my elevator pitch of how to look upon a perspective on how to look upon the future ports. So 10 minutes. Thanks a lot.
Michael, thank you so much for that wonderful explication of what digitalization means. Albeit at a conceptual and theoretical level, it's still deeply rooted in practice, and we can see that. So I remember reading one time that there is nothing quite as practical as a good theory. You know, you have to do the sort of theoretical work behind the scenes, and it's great to see that that is being done, and it's great to see the command that you have of that entire subject. What a pity we haven't got longer to hear from you, but maybe we can tap into your knowledge again at some time. Thank you very much indeed, indeed, Michael. So we are now going to head into our second panel discussion. So without further ado, I will hand back to you, Adele.
Thanks, Liam. Yes, I'm not. Oh, sorry. Now I think you can see me now. Thanks, Liam, and thank you, Michael. That was a fascinating presentation. And, you know, I think that there's so much different activity in the maritime sector when you talk about digitalization and different projects, that it's really good to get that snapshot overview of you on really where things stand. And I certainly would love to explore that a little bit further. So hopefully we get the opportunity maybe at another time to go through some of the points that you mentioned there. We're now moving into the second panel. So our first panel really focused on the user's perspective. So we heard from 3 of the ports. And our second panel now is looking at the future. So the future of digitalization in ports. And we're going to hear now from, we've 2 companies here who are at the cutting edge of technology that is being employed in this regard. And we have 2 other speakers that are very much at the cutting edge of thought in this sector. And we have Nuno Marques, the CEO of Wavecom in Portugal, and Mr. João Martinez, the CEO of Calido, Mr. Richard Clayton, the Chief Correspondent in Lloyd's List, and Mr. Frank Jensen, the IT and Trade Facilitation Senior Expert in Circle. And Frank has a long career with the European Commission previous to his current role, and has a lot of expertise in terms of customs and, you know, digitalization in terms of trade facilitation. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from our 4 panelists today. Similar to the first session, each of them will provide an overview, and then we will move into the discussion session. So I'd like to invite Mr. Nuno Marquez, from the CEO of Wavecom, to give your 5-minute overview first. Nuno, can you hear me okay? Do we have Nuno?
Yes, I'm here, sorry.
No problem. Great.
I'm trying to share my screen, but yeah, I can do it.
Great, thank you, Nuno. I can see your content coming up now. So great.
Okay, thank you. So let's start. So we are Wavecom. We are a telecommunication company from Portugal. We are now 20 years old. Okay, so we are a grown-up company, and we work in ports since, I don't know, 2012 or something like that. We have a big project in port of Algeciras in south of Spain. It's not Atlantic port, but I think is a good reference and also very close to the reality of Atlantic ports. So as I said, we do technology. Okay, this is something that we do. We do Wi-Fi, we do microwave links, we do critical and communication for voice and data. We do real-time location systems where you can locate assets or people. We also do smart transportation applications and technology. We do smart port, of course, that's why we are here. We do smart cities, and the first panel that we listened this morning, we can see the interaction between ports and cities, because as was stated prior, 80% of the Atlantic ports are near or inside cities. So it's very important to have data and sensorization, like we see, like we're going to see in the next slides, not only in port but also in city, and try to understand the influence between the city and the port, and the port and the city. So about communications, we do everything that I think a port needs to have a good layer of communication that is mandatory to have to build up the digital transformation upon this layer, this infrastructure layer of communication. So we do 4G and 5G nowadays on private network on port of Algeciras. We did a big project, and we are in the big project of 4G, of private 4G. We also have a huge coverage, full coverage of Wi-Fi. Now we're trying to, it's not Wi-Fi 6 right now, it's Wi-Fi 5, but we are trying to promote it to Wi-Fi 6, if you can say so. It is important to have a ubiquitous network, like we're going to see on the next slides. We do critical communication, that voice critical communication or emergency communication that normally ports use. We also do IT networks and sensorization and tracking and real-time location. About critical communication, as I was saying, we do PMR, DMR, Tetra, and 4 and 5G private networks. Nowadays, mainly 4 and 5G private network. I think that will be the future, because not only you can have voice, that is mandatory, but also you can have video. And sometimes in emergency situation and normal operation, video could be helpful more than words, and just only words. About the communication, we can divide this in three layers. That has to do with what you want to communicate between machine to machine, man to machine, man to man, etc. So we have the first layer that you can have is LoRaWAN, is a new standard, is a machine to machine protocol. You can communicate between sensors and machines that are getting the data from that sensors, or to activate or to put in place some jobs made by machines to be triggered by this trigger on this IoT layer of LoRaWAN. LoRaWAN is an open protocol, so you don't need license, and it can be used across Europe or across the world. Then you have private 4G and 5G. 4G, everyone knows. 5G, someone knows. It's a new standard of mobile communication. You can have video, you can have voice, you can have internet. And then you have Wi-Fi 6, for instance. You have a coverage of Wi-Fi 6, you have more density, because as you can see on this graph, LoRaWAN, probably you need 1-2 base stations per port. On private 4 or 5G, maybe you need 5, 6, 10 base stations. On Wi-Fi 6, you need, like, I don't know, 100 or 200 access points to cover the same area. This is an image from Aveiro Port. We are a company from Aveiro.
1 minute to conclude.
Okay, I'll try to be as quick as possible. As you can see, you can have these areas of coverage. On real-time location, we can locate assets, we can locate people, and we can do this on real time and deliver it to a proper platform that can be used by all the stakeholders on the port, including, for instance, the city, if you want. About sensorization, we can do sensorization on air, on traffic, on parking, on energy, on waste, on plagues, if you have that, not COVID, of course, and on beaches if the port authority has also authority on closest beach. On smart waste, all of these sensors, we can produce data, and this data can be delivered to all the stakeholders of a port. The new ports, the ports are logistic hubs, okay? But if you have digitalization, if you put digitalization on a port, you can be also a tech hub, a digital hub, because you are in a crucial point of the economy. And so you can use not only logistics to communicate and to interact with the rest of the society, but you also can use technology to do that. We have a lot of applications that you can use on sensorization, and Wavecom is a 100-guy company here in Portugal. Nevertheless, we do projects all over across the world. We do have a project in Spain that I was talking about, Algeciras, in Italy, in UK, but also in places like Brazil, Mozambique, Jamaica, and even China. If you have any questions about the technology and the way that we can think that technology can improve the operations of ports, please feel free. This is
Thank you,
welcome. Thank
Nuno.
you.
Thank you, Nuno. That's an excellent overview of some of the technologies that are being used to transform the industry. And I'm really looking forward to discussing that more in our panel session. Thank you, Nuno. Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Joan Martinez, who's the CEO of Kaleido. Joan, oh, there we are. So Joan, has been always working in logistics, but is really the driving force now behind the innovation strategy in Kaleido. So really looking forward to hearing about that, Joan. The floor is yours.
Okay, sure. So, hi everybody. I'm Kaleido CEO. Kaleido is a European global logistic operator. We have different offices and investments in 6 countries over 4 continents. Of course, we are handling around 4 terminals, but we are freight forwarders. We are logistic center operators, inside logistic providers, and so on. So innovation is a critical part of our activity, and that's why we have a spin-off called Kaleido Tech. It's an independent company, 100% focused on innovation, particularly with open innovation approach. So, of course, we have different kind of products like the forklift float, magnet foam, or block lasher, kind of hardware, we can say, looking for lashing, cargo lashing systems, cargo protection materials, or ancillary equipment in order to optimize port operations or logistic operations. But today we are talking about digitalization, so I must be focused on the kind of things we develop. You can see here some of our solutions portfolio, not only these 4 solutions, but we are running already digitalization projects, of course, asset optimization, visibility and predictability tools like freight intelligence, or artificial intelligence, artificial vision solutions too. Of course, our first aim is to be competitive, productive. So the kind of things we are developing are because of improvements we need to develop. But of course, more and more we are building new digital solutions together with our clients worldwide. So you can see here important achievements. We are not only taking advantage within Kaleido, but even we are selling these kind of solutions even to our competitors, not only to our clients. So it's quite a paradox, but is running quite well up to now. The most important part I would like to share with you is not the solutions. It takes time, and I think that is not so relevant today, but is the open innovation ecosystem we are running. We are starting in San Francisco, California in 2015, opening the first accelerator focused on transport and logistics. At the same time, we are starting to work with Volkswagen Group, Lufthansa Cargo, Ingram Micro, and other guys. Actually, we are running our own open innovation ecosystem, our own accelerator, and we have extremely close to the market approach, a real approach, running projects with private funding, just a little bit with public funding from time to time. We need to be quick, extremely close to market, as I said before, and we are selecting the right partner at the right time, depending of the project. So considering project by project. That's it. I think we are running a little bit out of time, so I would like to offer all our knowledge, ideas, opinions later on. So thanks all of you for the time.
Thank you, Joan. That was a fantastic introduction to Kaleido, and looking forward to discussing it in the panel. So our next speaker is Mr. Richard Clayton, who is the Chief Correspondent with Lloyd's List. So Lloyd's List is one of the world's oldest journals, and Richard covers digitalization and human element issues in shipping. And this interest was sparked by his by discussions around autonomous shipping. So Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adele. It's really interesting from the shipping perspective to see how many of the same issues are being raised within the port community. However, I think one of the points that Michael Lind made, that we need to connect what happens at sea with what happens on shore. It just isn't being done adequately at the moment. So I have 3 opening thoughts and one concern that I'd like to share with you. All of these have already been raised, interestingly. The first thought that I had was that digitalization is not a goal in itself, it's a tool, which is exactly what Isabel Reichbust said right at the beginning, and certainly from the shipping perspective, and I hope not from the port's perspective, the ship owners are being encouraged to see digitalization as an end state, a bit like decarbonization. This is the target that we need to end at. And of course, it isn't. It's a tool. It's a way of becoming more efficient and more sustainable. And I think until you encourage ship owners to see that there's a financial aspect to this that benefits them, then they'll not exactly be quick in investing in digital processes. The second point relates to something that Paul O'Regan made in his presentation, that at the top of the agenda must come people. And certainly in the shipping sector, it does appear that we see digitalization as a way of removing or reducing people from ships' crews. It shouldn't be that at all. What we've got is now a plethora of data, and that data is analyzed, and the analysis of that data gives us insight that we need to take decisions, and it's people who take decisions. So we might have to reskill some of the people at sea and on shore, but the object must not be just to remove people from the equation. I think the third point I'd like to make is a point that Michael Lind has already made, that the whole digitalization process is still far too fragmented. And I think part of the reason for that is that we've got two groups of companies creating our digital landscape for us. We have the technology providers who have put together an ecosystem in which they provide all the elements. So you have to buy into that ecosystem. But on the other side, we have startups, dozens of startups, each of which have one great idea that they claim will revolutionize the whole industry. And the problem is they're not talking to one another. I think over the past 2 or 3 years, there has been a trend for an understanding that the technology providers can't provide all of the digital capability that we need. So they are acquiring some of the startups which can fill in the gaps in what they have to offer. And some of the startups indeed are coming together and bringing together their knowledge and their expertise. So slowly there is a bit of an amalgamation, and we really do need that if we are going to take our digital journey forward. Now, the concern that I have, and I've written on this quite a bit in Lloyd's List, is in shipping, maybe in ports as well, but in shipping, the digital landscape is being created by technologists. They've got brilliant ideas, but how well do they know the shipping and the ports sectors? What I need to see is much more amalgamation between the technology people and the actual running of ships and the actual running of ports. When that happens, we'll be in a much stronger position. And I think only when that happens can we focus our education and training resources and get back to that human element that I'm so keen to encourage. Thank you, Adele.
Thank you, Richard. Some really interesting points there. And I think the people element that you mentioned is something really important that you mentioned Paul had touched on, and that, really worth exploring a bit further, because often there is this view that digitalization is there to replace people, which is not the case. And when you talk about autonomous shipping as well, there's a view that that's unmanned ships, when a lot of the time it is not unmanned ships, but more efficient use of personnel on ships, and that there is a need to reskill and other types of roles. And I think there's an understanding of that required in the industry in terms of what exactly does that mean, and what does that exactly mean in the future of shipping. And that idea of bringing together technology and, you know, and the actual industry, so the technology providers and industry. So lots of interesting food for thought there for the panel discussion. Okay, so we'll move on to our final speaker of the panel and before we move into the discussion. So our final speaker is Mr. Frank Jansen. Frank is the IT and trade facilitation expert, senior expert in Circle Group. And Frank is a well-known international expert and lead consultant in the domain of trade and transport facilitation and border management around the single window, streamlining of border procedures and e-commerce. And Frank has worked on these projects in a number of jurisdictions. So really looking forward to getting Frank's insight on this. And Frank has also worked for international organizations such as the World Bank, the IMF, and has been working with the European Commission in this regard as well. So looking at the EU customs processes. So really, really interesting background, Frank. So looking forward to hearing your overview.
Thank you very much, Adele, for your introduction and also for the invitation to participate today at this interesting event. So, as we only have 5 minutes, I will immediately start with the content. So I would like to approach it from an angle which is what challenges are we facing? The first one, I will highlight each of the 5 in a 1 minute presentation. First is the Brexit business environment, which we haven't digested now. We still have a lot of practical problems and papers to fill out. Second is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has pushed us to digitalization. Then the third one is the further need for transport and cross-border procedures to be more efficient and therefore to be digitalized. Then also we want to increase the efficiency of the interconnection of the sectors and also the industries, because a lot is still happening in silos. And then the last point also mentioned by other speakers is of course the sustainability, the what we call in Europe the Green Deal. Now, first of all, on the Brexit, as you know, there's a lot of practical difficulties, and one of the digital solutions for that, and which are now applied more and more in a number of countries, is instead of, for example, having all kinds of transit arrangements for goods to be supervised by the authorities by means of all kinds of declarations, is to have digital equipment which are based on number plate recognition, cameras and electronic seals and things like that, to create what we call a virtual customs corridor, or you could also call it a authorities corridor, because it's not only customs who use it, and that would make the trade between the EU on the land side and the UK, and then between the UK and Ireland, much more easy to use and cost friendly, because now there's a lot of guarantees involved which are very expensive. So a lot of technology and digitalization of the information can definitely help us a lot in reducing the cost and reducing the bureaucracy. Then second point is the COVID-19. There, the estimation of the cost is for this, for last year was 64 billion, and there has also been a drive to reduce the human intervention. So also there, digitalization is very important, and in practice, it comes down in a lot of the cases in our maritime environment to investing in port community systems and single windows, either maritime single windows or trade or logistics single windows, of a combination of it, which handle all of the information and where all of the stakeholders have immediate access to the information and can also act within the system. Last point on this is that between these PCSs or single windows, there is now more and more a trend to create trusted networks. There is the International Port Community System Association, who has, for example, created such a trusted network and which enables exchange of information between ports and therefore between stakeholders. And of course, that is all based on digitalization. Then another evolution is, I would say, a further drilling down in terms of the port community systems and the single windows, which now more and more become multimodal, as you can see on the slide on the left side below. It not only concerns sea, but especially air and also land, and more also rail, so that there is multimodal approach, all within a digital environment. But also important is that more and more additional services are linked to that, like banking, insurance, of course, finding transport, finding commercial partners. So these digital systems also become kind of a hub to find partners to have your end-to-end business being successful. So that is quite an important evolution. The slides which you see here are from the latest I would say materialization of that in Abu Dhabi, so in the United Arab Emirates, where they're doing this, but also Singapore has taken similar initiatives. Saudi Arabia does similar things. So this is definitely on the rise and therefore the future. And more on the European front, how now to make that all of that does not only work in a given port, but that at least at the European level, things can communicate with one another. So one initiative is the European Maritime Single Window Environment, which has as a goal to make these maritime single windows on the national basis now also compatible with one another, so that for the trade side, they can interact with these systems in the same way in all of the EU countries, and that will also reduce further cost and standardize the operations very much. A similar initiative exists for the European Customs Single Window Environment, where it is mainly harmonization between the pure customs and other authorities in the ports, airports, and at the borders, such as veterinarian officers, plant inspection officers, and others who are there. So to integrate and digitalize their functioning and information exchange. Then perhaps one of the last slides I have is a new initiative. It's called the Electronic Freight Transport Initiative, and that has as a goal in about 5 years' time to replace all of the paper transportation documents, which everything except maritime, so road, rail, and were not available also for air, but also inland waters, by replacing the paper by standardized electronic information exchange in the next year. So there it is forecasted that over the next 20 years, this will reduce cost by 27 billion euro. So it's a very important initiative where it's, I would say, very valuable that you are informed of it. And it will enable that the movement of goods in a multimodal way can exchange the information and make all of the transportation and regulatory requirements to be handled in an electronic way. So this is a regulation which has been voted end of last year and therefore will become reality. There's about 4 or 5 years of work on it, but it's a very important initiative for the future. And then coming to an end, the previous speakers have handled that, is also being able to handle your business in a digital environment. So the example here is given the digital twin, where on your screen you actually can follow the goods, and this is also important for the authorities like customs and port authorities. They know exactly what is going on, combined then with a principle of know your customers, or authorized economic operators, where the authorities will especially focus on unknown companies or companies who are known not to be compliant with the law, but those who are compliant and do regular business will have less inspections, less interference with their business. And this is being extended from the customs area to other areas, like we have seen the agricultural area. And there is a conference in about 10 days from now, which will discuss that also in an international environment. And there also, therefore, it will be standardized over several countries. And that if you're a trusted trader in one country, you will be it, of course, already in the whole EU, but there will also be mutual recognition agreements. If you're a trusted trader in Europe, you're also a trusted trader in China and in the USA. So therefore, these digital approaches and exchange of information on trusted traders is seen as very important. I think in 5 minutes, this is what I wanted to say, but I'm of course available for questions and for the panel discussions. Thank you very much, Adele and dear colleagues.
Thank you, Frank. And I certainly have lots of questions following that. That's been really informative. And I have earmarked a few questions for you there for the panel discussion from that. So thank you for that really, really excellent overview. Before we move into the panel discussion, I just want to comment on the last question from the poll. So Liz, I think you're going to share the results of the final poll.
Yeah,
the audience.
It's coming up there.
Great, thank you, Liz. So the second question on the poll that we invited our audience to participate in was what you see as the principal obstacles to digitalization in ports. So finance is a big issue there. Skills and ICT knowledge, clarity on policy and regulations in place. So availability of technology, we have nobody that felt that that availability of technology was a barrier. So it's actually how to implement the technology, financing it, and the clarity or policy on regulations in place. So interesting, some interesting comments there. So we'll go to our panel. So I'll invite you all to turn your cameras on. Anyone want to make a comment on that poll to start off with?
I can start about the ICT knowledge, which is probably the biggest barrier on that the participants on this poll point out. I think that Wavecom and companies like Wavecom can help it because in many cases the ports doesn't have that ICT knowledge that needed to put in place technology, but the companies can help them put in place that technology that is available, like the poll just point out. So private companies can also help not only delivering the technology, but putting in perspective the usage of that technology and the knowledge that our company, the type of Wavecom companies have to deliver this knowledge to the ports.
And just on that note, Nuno, can I just ask you, I noted during your presentation, you went through, different technologies that you're using, and, your company is at the cutting edge of technologies in terms of wireless networks and deploying those in a number of different environments. And for, as technology evolves and as ports or shipping companies make investments, what advice would you give? Because we see now we have 5G, what's going to be the next platform, that how do you future-proof your investments, or how do you make sure that, and it's like one of our panelists said earlier, that, for some of the smaller ports as well, that they may make investments that they have to know work for them. What advice would you give in terms of future-proofing your investments?
Well, that is a tough question, because as fast as the development of technology occurs, more difficult is to have a proven a future-proof investment. When we started 20 years ago, people were asking exactly the same question. This is a question that is happens in every era. But in that time, we are looking about 10 years or something like that. And nowadays, we see that 10 years in technology, it's too far. is too far. For instance, 10 years ago, we are talking about 3G. Now we are talking about 5G. So in 10 years time. So we just have, but something that you can filter is that new technology sometimes just to give you a little bit edge prior to older technology. There are more, but the steps are smaller. You understand? They are not big leaps as when the internet was introduced, for instance. Okay, that kind of leaps doesn't occur so much in the time. So if you buy, for instance, and taking your example, a 5G private network probably will last like 10 years. Okay, nevertheless, in 3 years time or 5 years time, we're talking about 6G or whatever. You understand? But you can use the same technology because the problems are almost the same. So you can keep using that technology through the years. You have to know what there is in the market and trying to understand what fits more for your needs.
And just as a follow-up to that, can I ask, with new technologies like 5G, where you've much greater bandwidth and you have much more flexibility in the types of information that you can share, are you seeing businesses requiring new applications, or what do you see as the future applications of the technology?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to center a little bit more in telecommunications because it's what we know. You have 5G, for instance, which have huge bandwidth. You can have streaming. You can do whatever you want. And in the other end, you have IoT technology, like for instance, LoRaWAN, when you have very small data, because we are talking, it's machine to machine telecommunications or communications, and we just want to see what temperature it is, it's open or close a window or whatever it is that, so it's less information. So you need other types of technology. So the future is not only faster and bigger and more, but sometimes less, because one of the problems is energy, okay? And if you have multiple sensors, thousands of sensors in the port scenario, for instance, you need to be autonomous, energetically autonomous. So you need to consume as less as possible, and less sometimes is more difficult than more. And so we have also cutting edge technology to just saying that it's 25 degrees and you need to open your air conditioner or whatever. Okay.
Great, thank you, Nuno. That's excellent. Just to move on to you, Joanne, can I just ask you about, so we're talking about these cutting edge technologies, and as more technology is available, there's more of an opportunity to apply them in the context of ports and logistics, and that's something that Claudio do in terms of innovation. So can you talk to me a little bit more about how you drive innovation? So from your company's perspective, you bring lots of different collaborators together. Can you talk to me about how that model may be applied in other contexts? How open innovation can be applied in the context of ports and shipping companies, do you think, that are looking to innovate?
Yeah, it's a long path. At the end of the day, we think that common sense is, coming to basics, right? We have a kind of methodology, open innovation methodology, inside Claudio. And of course, we try to identify pain points in order to tackle. And that's why I'm totally agree. Innovation is not the objective itself. It must be a tool, meaning digitalization or whatever, So we need to identify first the thing to be improved. Secondly, we need to be a team. If it's an internal team, it's okay. If we have a lack of knowledge, we need to look outside the company, and we do. Now, the partnership is extremely important. We need someone with a culture close to us, with knowledge, dynamic, and extremely close to market. So that's why it's so important to have private funding, not European funding or public funding, because the speed is not the same. The freedom you have in order to build a team is not properly, I mean, it's not 100% freedom, we can say. Of course, it's important to have your problem or client problem just on the center of the discussion. So, as I say at the beginning, it's quite a common sense attitude, but sometimes it's difficult to find. So.
And in that point as well, when you're talking about private investment, you know, these accelerator programs, accelerator models. So ourselves in Irish Maritime Development Office, we're partners in the ASPAN project, the Atlantic Ports Accelerator project, which is going to develop this model and accelerator network, you know, to bring together the innovators with the ports and the investors. You know, do you see those types of models as being particularly beneficial in terms of mobilizing some of that private sector investment?
We are trying to. I think that the model is improving slowly. The euro invested by a private company is more efficient than a euro coming from the European Union program. The gap, hopefully, is being reduced, and we are trying to do via or through ASBAM project and this kind of initiative. I think that it's extremely important to tackle such inefficiencies, we can say, because we need to move quick and we need to be efficient, of course. So that's a real challenge.
Great. Thank you, Joan. Richard, I just wanted to ask you about those poll results, and also, you know, Joan mentioned there about innovation as being a tool, and that's something that you mentioned as well in your overview when you talked about digitalization is a tool. It's not an end game for companies, and that we see that there is a lot of fragmentation still, and you have the, you know, the larger tech companies, and then, you know, the smaller startups not really, you know, collaborating, and we need that to happen more. What do you see as the big barriers from some of your, I suppose, conversations with shipping companies?
Do you know, the biggest barrier is the barrier of trust. We've got so much data here, but some of it is my data and some of it is other people's data. And I don't want to share my data in case you share it with somebody else. And that to me is the actual key here. In an ideal digital world, we would all be sharing the data with each other so that we could smooth out the bottlenecks and make everything work. But because I think there are some of my data that I would rather you didn't have, because you might use it against me. And I'm just, it was Paul, I think, who was saying it's taken 10 years to build an element of trust at one of these ports. We think of trust as something you can just plug in and then I will trust you. It doesn't work like that. You know, trust is one of those soft, not soft skills, but a soft attribute. So the more we can kind of work together and collaborate, the better it will be. But I think that one of the other problems we've got within the port community is that there's so many stakeholders. If there were far fewer stakeholders, it'd be much easier to get together in a room and say, this is how we'd like to work it. But because you've got the agency and the bunkers and the port authority and customs and border protection, they all have their own little, well, not little, but you know, significant roles to play. We need to somehow get fewer parties or more parties working together so that this whole process works.
And do you see a role for the private and the public sector to work together? Or how do you think that could evolve?
Of course I do, but I think the innovation must come from the private sector, as one of the other panelists was saying. I absolutely agree with that. And it's often the smaller companies that haven't got the great burdens upon them that come up with the best ideas. One of the whole areas here, and maybe we'll go on to this later, is about how you bring the next generation into our industries. And I think this is one of those areas where they say, actually, we've got a real problem that we'd like you to help us with. Not the technology necessarily, that's the easy bit, but how can we make this data flow in a way that benefits everybody?
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about, the next generation, and, I think there's a piece of work to be done right at, from a school level as well to university level on the opportunities in the transport sector, particularly in the shipping industry, and that people see a career for themselves as well. People that are working and young graduates that are at the cutting edge of technology, that see themselves as having a career in this industry. I think, we're certainly moving towards that, but we're certainly not there yet. And I think there still is a piece of work to be done there. The other thing is, when you talk about sharing data, we see some of the container shipping, particularly the container operators, coming together now, and around blockchain platforms and things like that. But there still seems to be a lot of disjointedness. You have, who's going to join my platform and who's going to join the other one. That it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. And I think, having that kind of standardized model is what will actually take the industry probably to the next level. And on that note, I want to come to Frank, because Frank, you mentioned a lot of areas in your presentation, and you spoke about the EU Maritime Single Window, the EU Customs Single Window, the EFTI. As a member state, where do you start? Where who takes charge of this at a national level, and how do we make progress? So we're talking about EFTI in 5 years' time. What do we need to be doing right now, do you think?
Well, the first thing I can say that this legislation is only approved when experts and national officials have met many times in working groups. There are lots of programs which finance these kind of meetings, and experts, they discuss for a long time, they make draft documents, then they agree on them, then they move on to the next step. So each of the ministries and the government agencies which are within that competence, they participate. Then there are joint meetings. If, for example, the maritime transport, and I say something, the border police needs to agree on something, but then they have joint meetings. And of course, with COVID, this has become a bit more difficult. It's all virtual, but all of this is going on. And what you have in principle for the important decisions, all of the EU countries participate in the meetings and in the decision making. In more technical things, they can volunteer, and maybe only half of them participate, and the others are observers, and they follow this. So all of that is definitely with participation of all of the countries involved, and of course they have their say in the decision making. And the agenda for implementation, the different deadlines are part of the decision. There is always a time plan, and they say what is mandatory and what is nice to have, so to speak. So that definitely, I know from experience, is well organized. And also, I should say that for the private industry, there are also trade contact groups, and like the maritime industry is very present in those groups. They study all of the proposals, they make comments and suggestions. I'm also involved in evaluation exercises of things which were decided a little bit ago, and then they are also interviewed on what are their findings, what went well, what was difficult, what is still open or not achieved in time, and why. So no, from that point of view, it's all happening. But yeah, for the large public, it may be a bit of a closed world, but I can assure you it's all there, and it's organized. And if people are unhappy, then of course they go to the members of the European Parliament or to the Commissioner, and they escalate this, and it is seen to it that they have their say.
And do you think, Frank, there's a step change? So, you know, the EU Maritime Single Window, the concept was introduced a number of years ago. But do you think there's a step change now in the ambitions at an EU level?
I think so, yeah. I think it's going forward, and I think it's emphasized then what I explained, the EFTI, which we digitalized the other types of transport, and it is clear that you must make the end-to-end transport from where goods are produced to where they are consumed, and they go over land and over sea, then they arrive and they go on land again. And this is not only a transshipment to another means of transport, but they also meet with a lot of regulatory obligations because, for example, military goods, they can only move under strict control and so on. As we know, plants and animals are very strictly controlled. So for that, I think we're making progress. There are less silos, and there is more harmonization. So exchange of information is being done. This was also the goal of the European Maritime Single Window, to come to better exchange between the single windows, and especially the port community systems, because many single windows are based on port community systems which have evolved in extending their functionality. So I think the picture is gradually becoming more complete. As I said, it's another 5 years before it will work, and then it will probably be another 5 years before it will work everywhere. But we're getting there, and I think we're doing steps in the right direction. Yes.
And you mentioned Brexit and COVID in your presentation as well, and it's something we actually haven't really touched on in either of the panels. But do you think that COVID, you know, and well, Brexit as well, but you know, COVID has been a significant shock to the economy, and we've all had to change ways of doing things at every level in society, from healthcare to how you do your shopping. Do you think that COVID has accelerated the uptake of digitalization? Do you think it's, you know, it's caused another step change in the industry as such?
Yes, definitely. I'm more than 100% convinced of this. Before, I always had to make these presentations to convince people, because many were happy the way they did things, and you have to kind of sell it and convince them of the profits. Now it's the reverse. Everyone has understood with COVID, there was no other solution. You could not meet with people. It was dangerous to exchange papers and hand them from one office to the other. So everyone, over 3 months' time, became an adept of digitalization. And then the question was, how do we do it? And if you do it in your own environment, then you said, but how now do I do it together with other competent companies, partners, stakeholders, and so on? How do we do it together? And this is then the area of the harmonization and integrated digitalization. Yeah.
And just a final question on, you know, ensuring the information exchange with partners on the sea side and the land side, which will be really important. Do you think that's possible in a time-critical environment?
Yeah, I think of course, it's done step by step, but the advantage, I would say, of digital information is that it is instantly available to all of the stakeholders. I think there are, I would say, other issues then which pop up, like security and the need for profiles and access to information, that you can only access information on a need-to-know basis. Once the information exists digital, and it is provided to a platform like a single window, and which meets with the land side and the sea side, then the most important thing is that people who need the information and are entitled to the information have access to it, and that it's well protected, that the information cannot be changed, that then also, as there are intellectual property and there are economic interest, that only those who need to see it have access to it, and that it respects, as Richard has said, there are many players there, and you cannot just put everything in the open, because otherwise they will push out the middleman, so to speak. And of course, there are vested interests and there are traditions. So we try to help forward the business and to make it more efficient, but it's certainly not the first goal, or not the goal at all, to prevent the participation. We think there is enough to be done for everyone. So it needs to be well organized, and security, unfortunately, is one of the main issues that we have to keep an eye on.
Thank you, Frank. There's a question that has come in from the audience that's related to that, and I'd be interested, to hear from some of our technology companies as well. But how do you tune the needs of the data economy with the protection of personal data of the various holders of the logistics chain? So how do we marry that? How, this idea that we need, data to make the logistics chain more efficient, with the protection of personal data. And I think that and cybersecurity is going to be something that's more and more apparent in the industry. Does anyone want to give an answer to that?
I can start briefly. Say, in Europe, there is this regulation which is called GDPR, which is on the intellectual property rights. It is a challenge that everyone knows. It's complex, it needs to be well managed, and the fines are huge. I think this is a new point of hesitation for companies to participate, because I forgot how much it is, but the fines can be, it's either 2% or 4% of your turnover, not of your profit, of your total turnover. So it's huge for shipping lines and port companies and so on. So it is there, and it's I would say it's a legal speciality in its own to assure it's there. So everyone involved and in these operations need to get legal advice on it. And if you're a big company, you need to have a data protection officer who knows this inwards out. And it's one of the most challenging things at the moment, for sure.
Thank you, Frank, for that. We're going to close the panel, but just any further comments from the rest of our panelists on that? Anyone want to make any final remarks?
I can add something. I think that all the technology that there is put in place right now produce data, of course, and this is the main issue. And the data should be handled carefully, but in the way that is provided to every stakeholders. I think that the point here is how to imagine that all the information is put on the data lake, okay? Is everything there? Nevertheless, even that the information is centralized in some way and then can be accessed by all the stakeholders, nevertheless should be put in place authentication methods that I only can access to the data that is relevant to me, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. It's only not about security, but also about be feasible to use that information. Because as I was talking about, if you put 10,000 of sensors in a port, that sensor sends an information per second or per minute, you have thousands of gigabytes of information. But for I don't know, a track holder company, it doesn't make any sense to know what is the monoxide, the carbon on the harbor, on the port, you see. So I think that you have to centralize the information, put in the vault, in the security place, and then to have authorization and authentication security done by the stakeholders to access to that information. That's, I think, is the issue.
Thank you, Nuno. And on that note, again, similar to the first panel, I could talk for a lot longer with you all, and but unfortunately we're at time. So I just want to extend my sincere thanks to you all, to Nuno Marquez from Wavecom, Juan Martinez, Calido, Richard Clayton, Lloyd's List, and Frank Jensen from Circle Group. Thank you so much for your contributions today, and I'll pass you all back to Liam.
Thank you.
Paul, sorry, it's Paul we're going to now, Paul Brewster with a wrap up. So Paul is going to do a wrap up on some of the key outputs of the sessions today. Thanks, Paul.
Oh, thanks very much, Adele, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I think like many of you, we've been taking lots of notes and really impressed with today's event. I think at the start of the workshop, Liam posed, I thought, a very interesting question. Can digitalization solve all our problems? And I suppose in particular on our current focus for ambitions for the sustainable blue economy and the Green Deal objectives, it's very relevant. I think everyone will agree the contributions from our speakers assembled for the workshop have helped enormously to explore this question, and also to help us identify some immediate actions we can take to accelerate progress. At the first session, we had some insights, some great insights from our ports, and just to capture some of those, I thought to start with the point that it's important to measure progress, to have metrics, to track what we're doing, and to take appropriate actions on this basis. And again, that leads on to the issue that some ports are more advanced than others, but I think we've seen some really good examples of where knowledge exchange and partnering can play a role to improve everybody and everyone across this area. I thought a great example of this was the logistics single window in Portugal. The advances they have made there are really relevant and something all of us can learn and progress from. And I think among that, a theme that went throughout, I thought, a lot of the discussions, that it's not just about the technology. Interoperable frameworks, legislation, governance are all probably more important than the tools. And we're all too aware of the role ports have in a multimodal system. Our ports are trade gateways, and many of the sort of customs regulatory checks take place in this environment. But as a consequence, I think our ports are a natural fit for a lead role in implementing community systems and single windows. The role of our ports in sectors, established sectors like fishing, automotive, and emerging sectors like offshore renewable energy, I think we saw some really good examples of where improving efficiency and productivity in our ports will benefit all these sectors, as well as our wider trading economy. Overall, I was really struck by the point about the need for collaboration between our small and large ports. That if we do end up with a divide between the sort of big players that can sort of finance a lot of developments more easily, then we'll have missed the opportunity. Sharing advances and teaming up to overcome funding barriers will be crucial to delivering the benefits across our ports in the Atlantic and in the EU. I think the second session that's just finished gave us a lot of food for thought and a lot to consider. We know that our maritime ecosystem poses some unique challenges, but equally for smart and sustainable ports, we need to think of it as a multi-dimensional hub: transport, information, and energy. And I thought this was really insightful. We've seen some great examples of new applications, new business opportunities in the maritime sector, and indeed new products and services that maybe haven't been traditionally associated with maritime activities being introduced to ports, and this will help drive innovation. The need to connect what happens at sea, so our shipping sector and our port sector, and I think again this point that the financial benefits, there has to be a financial business case for using these new technologies and new tools. It's essential in shipping, but it's essential throughout our sectors. Some of the softer areas were highlighted, and again, I think the poll results there were really interesting. That, you know, we have digital tools to enhance decisions taken by people, I think was a really strong comment, and the skills element and related to that, building trust are going to be really important going forward. I think just some final points on that. We've seen some changes to our trading arrangements, and recovery from the pandemic, I think, has reinforced the need for accelerating our work on digitalization. As we speak today, we've seen COVID accelerate digitalization in all our lives, our Zoom calls and so on. And I've no doubt that it will have a similar effect on our maritime sector, on our ports. So I think to sort of wrap up, I know many of you will have been taking notes. You know, I have three points that I've noted for myself in the work I do. I think the new CEF program will open up opportunities to achieve the sort of scale and synergies that we've seen among Atlantic ports today, where we can bring forward valuable projects to improve the efficiency, productivity, and sustainability of our ports and shipping sector. I think we need to continue to engage with ongoing developments. I know it's not all about technology, but we have to keep abreast of the technological advances. And I suppose the New Horizon Europe program will present lots of opportunities in that regard. We again, cooperation throughout the Atlantic area will give us opportunities to share costs for pilot projects, and at the same time put us in a strong position to make that transfer from pilot projects to commercial rollout. And I think the overarching thing and themes such as building trust and developing skills, for me, that comes from continuing to support collaboration and cooperation among all our small and large ports. These two areas are sometimes presented as being conflicting with competition, but I don't think so. I think we can achieve a lot more through these activities, and ultimately we end up with increased levels of business opportunities for everyone to compete for. So again, I look forward to hearing about the activities that today's workshop will have stimulated with all of your areas, and continuing to engage with you all to identify activities that we can cooperate on. So thanks again for everyone's contribution. I will now hand over to Dimphna Keogh, the Atlantic Strategy Committee Chair, for some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm just checking, can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, Dimphna, we can see you and hear you. Perfect.
Thank you. So, colleagues, let me first of all begin and on behalf of the Atlantic Strategy Committee by thanking the presenters of our keynote addresses from DG Mare Reka, Ms. Isabel Reichbust and Professor Michael Lind. Thank you for your contributions and for taking the time to participate here today. I'd also like to thank all our panelists and everyone who attended, participated, contributed, and who have just observed and learned as I did today. Everyone's input is important, so thank you for giving generously of your time and your attention. Throughout the workshop today, I was reminded of a phrase I heard used at home throughout my years growing up, which was that every day is a school day, and it certainly was that here today. Digitalization is a key word that is used a lot these days, and to gain an understanding for what it means in practical, real terms in the port sector has been an education for sure. Digitalization as a tool and a key pillar of advancement. The challenges the sector faces, including cybersecurity and data protection, the need to build trust between the various stakeholders and actors, the interface between ports and cities, between ports and the connection between ports and research facilities, ports integration with the transport chain, maritime informatics, communications networks, sensor technology, data protection considerations, innovation ecosystems, investment opportunities, digital twin technology. The exploration of all of these concepts and challenges and ideas here today has been really informative, and in each of these topics could probably be worthy of their own workshop. I think it's evident that digitalization has the potential to increase the efficiency, competitiveness, and connectivity of our ports infrastructure. And a major takeaway from today is also that the efforts being made under this, and indeed all pillars of the Atlantic Action Plan, transcend national boundaries, and the need for inclusivity and to bring along stakeholders and partners as we implement the goals of the action plan will be fundamental to its successful implementation. Today's work will contribute to building the solid foundation and setting the direction in which these goals will be developed and implemented over the lifetime of the action plan. And today has also highlighted the role that ports have in implementing the European Green Deal, assisting in our economic pandemic recovery efforts, and addressing the new EU landscape post-Brexit. This, as you know, is the first in a series of workshops that will be hosted by the Irish Pillar 1 coordinators, and many of the workshops will take place across the 4 pillars of the action plan and across the member states of the Atlantic Strategy Committee as we work through the various phases of implementation of the action plan. These workshops are essential elements in canvassing stakeholder feedback, as full participation and consensus is critical in delivering on the action plan and in the successful continued development of a sustainable blue economy in the Atlantic region. So congratulations, Liam and his team, Adele, Paul and Fiona, and also to Liz Gavin of the Atlantic Strategies National Hub, and to Alina and her team and the assistance mechanism for putting this event together. So again, Mila Buikos, as we say in Irish, thank you all for your contribution to the Atlantic Action Plan and the wider maritime sector, not just today, but every day. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dipna, for those closing remarks, and if I may say, for your continued support and enthusiasm and energy for this entire project, which is inspiring and keeps us all going. Before the workshop closes, I'd like to add my thanks to the thanks that Dipna has already expressed to the speakers and panelists, to Alina and her team in the assistance mechanism, to the task force that work alongside us, whose assistance was invaluable in structuring the workshop and in providing such expert speakers from your respective countries. I'd like to thank Liz Gavin, our National Hub, who's done such stellar work in her role and in the assistance she's giving in preparing for and running today's event. I, of course, would like to thank my own colleagues, Paul and Adele, who were terrific today, but also to say a word about Fiona Murphy, who is new in the IMDO and behind the scenes has been doing all of the hard work to make the rest of us look good. So thank you very much indeed, Fiona. And finally, I would like to thank our audience for participating. To remind you, as Dipna did, that there are 3 further workshops coming up in July, September and October, which will link into the event in Dublin that is being organised as Ireland comes to the end of its presidency of the Atlantic Strategy. So, obrigado e adios, merci et au revoir, gracias y adios. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye for now.